青少年容易冲动，缺乏克制能力。
他在很小的时候就有比较算是性方面的幻想，对于女生。
如果饱受精神疾病的煎熬，有可能掉入犯罪的深渊。
他们就会有一种思想：哦，我把你除掉，我就自由了。
2名青少年因为情绪和心理上的失控，无法自拔，而犯下杀人罪。
He stabbed the father in the neck with the fruit knife.
就是在胸口、心脏的部位刺中要害。
当新闻媒体报道了嫌犯的名字，才发现到，原来我真的认识这个人。
年少的杀人犯们将为自己的罪行付出什么代价？
我是沈茂全，7岁搬进乌兰的，也算是乌兰的第1代居民。我家附近有一个 Mandai Park， 饭后大家都爱到那里去做一些休闲活动，散步、打篮球。在中秋节时，就很多人都爱去那边提灯笼。
2010年9月22日。这天是农历8月15中秋节，一个属于阖家团圆的传统节日。这家人也跟往年一样，在乌兰住家附近的万里德光公园欢聚。年轻妈妈、爸爸、10岁的儿子，还有侄儿们一起度过了美好的时光。
中秋节快乐！
时间晚了。年轻妈妈决定先带年幼的侄儿们回家，路程只需要几分钟。但是少妇却迟迟没有归来，也没有接听心急的家人打的电话。在四处寻找的当儿，丈夫和儿子得知，公园一带刚刚发生了一起命案。遇害者是一名长发的年轻女性。丈夫虽然无法相信眼前的一切，但是为了确认受害者的身份，拨打了太太的电话号码。
我得知凶杀案发生时是透过媒体、社交媒体。然后还有一些新闻管道，当中就有说到死者的金钱上没有任何损失，财务也没有任何损失，所以就觉得很奇怪，为什么就这样的发生？会有一种让我惊慌失措的感觉，就是会不会有一天我会经过那一个地方，然后就不明而白的就被捅。
一名没有仇家的平凡妈妈。为什么会在回家的路上遇害？摄制队邀请了新加坡国立大学法政科陈伟林副教授和法医精神科医生 Dr. Rajesh 对案发现场进行分析。
Look at the proximity to the basketball court.
Yeah.
So many people around.
On this side as well, a lot of people playing basketball.
A lot of them.
Yeah, in fact, there are multiple escape routes there, this side.
This side?
Yeah. And the lights of the court also get switched off at 10 o'clock, 10 p.m. Yeah.
Dr. Jacob, this is the Mandai Tekong Park Connector. This was where the crime happened on the 22nd of September 2010 at about 10:35 p.m. Now take a look. We have just passed the basketball court and the nearby playground. This is so close to the HDB block of flats. I wonder what's on his mind then.
Yeah, so it's quite atypical because, first of all, it's an open area. It's a Mid-Autumn festival. A lot of people are around. So it does show that the offender was not really considering the environment. He was probably not considering that he could be caught. Maybe there was a danger element to it.
What do you mean by the element of danger?
Some cases, the offenders may do violent crimes in situations where they may experience a sense of thrill, like the danger of being caught and the thrill of getting away without being caught. It's like a balance. The place being dimly lit, and we also have these two kind of small hills on both sides, which is concealed from the main road. The chances of witnesses actually seeing the actual offense is probably limited.
当年调查人员在案发现场取获了几个线索：一把被折断的刀，还有刀的塑料包装套。
What happened on that fateful night? The victim was stabbed once on the back, deep stab, and when she turned over, she tried to block the blows. And she was trying to block, and there were defensive wounds on her hands, and there was a deep stab cut on her chest area where her heart is. This is the fatal wound.
凶手是谁？动机是什么？完全是个谜。但对调查人员来说，这起命案有令人不安的熟悉度。持刀袭击年轻长发的华族女性，这样的干案手法，过去9个月在新加坡北部地区已经发生了3次。2010年1月29日，一名31岁女性在义顺七道的祖屋电梯口遇刺。2月2号，在义顺6道跑步的女生突然被刺了好几刀。5月26日，又一名年轻女子在38旺祖屋区的电梯口被刺伤，3名受害者都保住了性命，但是中秋节被袭击的年轻妈妈却伤亡了。罪犯是同一个人吗？如果是，那执法人员面对的是一名连环攻击者，而且还是随机干案、无法预测的凶徒。
If someone touched a knife, and we should be able to determine who it was used on, if we are able to get a DNA match or fingerprint match.
Prof. Stella, the knife has been lying on the grass for possibly quite some time. So is there a possibility of contamination happening?
It depends. This is a public area, and anyone could have stepped on this area. It's wet. There are also insects here, and it's being exposed to the elements. It's highly likely that the DNA will undergo degradation.
当年，新加坡卫生科学局法政科的专家们马上投入了这起案件的侦查工作。
My name is Tan Wai Fan. I'm currently the senior consultant at the Biology Division Health Sciences Authority. In this particular case, I directed the examination of all the materials that were submitted to us. The challenges during that incident was the time, because there is concern that another murder, another stabbing will occur by the same person.
我们收到物证后，我们会先了解案发详情，看是否是要找嫌犯的 DNA， 或者是受害者的 DNA， 或者是两者的 DNA。刀片上的液体，用肉眼看液体像是血迹，但我们不确定，所以我们要用 Casimir 测试法来测试一下。这是一种蛋白质测试法。如果我们的样本有人类血液存在，它会呈现阳性反应。
During the time when the incident occurred, the technology is not as today. Okay, extraction methods were not as sensitive and did not extract as much DNA.
案发现场获取的物证还包括一个刀的塑料包装套。
现在我们要收取细胞样本，我们关注的是嫌犯所遗留下的皮肤细胞。
Unknown DNA can be traced because of the shedding of skin cells onto the object they have come into contact with. Shedding status is something that varies between individuals, whether they have washed their hands, whether they were jogging, exercising, or sweating profusely. On the knife blade, we only found the disease DNA profile. But we will manage to get a male DNA profile from the plastic sheet. From what I understand, the suspect actually ripped off the plastic sheath from the knife. Then he plunged the knife into the victim.
有了不明男子的 DNA， 照理说，调查人员应该可以很快找到嫌凶。
We searched the DNA database, but he was not in the DNA database. In 2010, samples were taken only from convicted offenders, rape, murder, and kidnapping, and very serious capital offenses. And because there was no person for us to compare, we were not able to identify the suspect.
能追查的线索越来越少，与时间赛跑的执法单位决定寻求前3起持刀袭击案的生还者，因为他们都记得嫌凶的样貌。这个拼图会是破案的关键吗？2010年，新加坡3个北部地区——义顺、三巴旺和雾兰，在1月到9月期间，有4名外形类似的华族女性被人用刀突袭。调查人员决定根据3名生还者的描述，做出法证面部合成。
法证面部合成是一个法证的技术。那这个科技神奇的地方，就是它能够把人家的想象或印象具体化，变成了一个图案。
新加坡国立大学法政科的林兴祥博士和陈伟林副教授，将示范当年调查人员如何根据受害者的描绘，去还原凶徒的样貌。
是这个样子吗？
应该是这个样子。
那调查人员呢，会问一系列的问题，然后受害者和目击者就会相对的回答，形容嫌疑犯的脸型、他的眼睛、鼻子、嘴巴以及他眉毛。法证面部合成在没有其他的证据下，能够使得很大的作用，而且也可能是破案的关键。
他的眼睛是长的、细的。
长
有一点
细
四方形。
那它是单眼皮还是双眼皮呢？
单眼皮。
请你形容一下它的眉毛。
眉毛很重要吗？
眉毛呢，代表了我们的脸框，它让你可以记住一个人的样貌。
女生通常都会喜欢画眉毛，就是因为这个原因。
那有一点大家可能不知道的，就是眼睛之间的距离、眼睛和鼻子的距离。还有鼻子和嘴巴的距离，那这些距离呢都很重要，因为它让我们能够掌握到一个人的脸的比例。
他的嘴唇薄的，
薄的，
太薄了，太薄了，厚一点，
再厚一点。
他的上面的嘴唇是有一个很明显的 M 型。
M 型啊，好的。那如果他脸上有任何特征，那包括了痣、伤疤或者是胎记，那调查人员呢就可以把这些特征包括在面部合成内。当然，这个技术也是有它的弱点，它不是完全的准确。 它必须和其他的证据一起使用，才能够让我们完全的了解这案件的来龙去脉。
对了，拼了出来，就是他。
拼图公开不久，有人通报其样貌与一名在大势海军基地的国民服役人员相似。这名20岁的服役人员被称为 AWOL King， 常常擅离职守，而且他在乌兰的住家离第4个案发现场只有500米的距离。当调查人员上前盘问是否知道警察为什么找他问话时，他回答是因为乌兰的女死者。年轻男子的名字叫苏伟坚。
我住在乌兰有25年了，命案发生在那一个公园，离家其实挺近的。当新闻媒体大做文章的时候，报道了嫌犯的名字苏伟坚，然后我就觉得说，我好像认识这个人，就特地去搜寻了一些关于他的影像报道，才发现到原来我真的认识这个人。天哪，这不是真的吧？我是在做梦吗？报道里的他跟我印象中的他会有很大的差别。
我是陈俊良，是一名刑事辩护律师。我还记得第一次去监狱探访这个苏伟坚的时候，跟一般的我的当事人比较不一样。头几次我见他的时候，他一句话都没说，就直直的在看着，就在观察着。
我跟苏伟坚在中1跟中2时同过班，下课后我们都会聚在一起玩一些 card games， 打一点点游戏机。我把苏伟坚有当朋友，他朋友不多，他的性格很冷漠，然后不多话，对朋友从来也不说谎，挺真诚的。只是不大爱开玩笑。我从离校后就再也没有看到他，就有一点纳闷，说这几年到底他发生了什么事，导致他会有这个暴力倾向，产生了对女生的不好感。
我处理过这么多凶杀案件最主要考量的因素就在于说，你要知道他们的想法如何。当事情发生的时候，他们的脑海中在想些什么？多数的凶杀案，不管是谋杀也好，误杀也好，这个被告人跟死者或者受害者，他们都有一定的联系，可能就是为了金钱的纠纷，可能为了情感上的创伤。可是苏伟坚就很特殊，因为他的3位受害者跟最后一位死者都跟他一点关系都没有，都不认识的。为什么一位这么年轻的被告会去伤害他完全所不认识的人？
如果把4个持刀袭击案放在一块儿，并从法政科和法政精神科的角度切入，能否透露一些苏伟坚的精神状态？
This is Yishun, Sembawang, and Woodlands. This represents a bird's eye view of the 4 crime scenes. First incident, Yishun Avenue 7, Void Deck. It's near the lift lobby. It happened on the 29th of January 2010, sometimes between 10:30 p.m. and 10:57 p.m.
I think the first thing is to look at the timing. So it happened at night, so the chance of discovery is lesser.
The victim said that she actually saw someone lurking around. Could he have been observing her for a while?
It was possible, yes.
Just 4 days after the first incident, on the 2nd of February 2010, sometime between 11 and 11:21 a.m. This second incident happened actually shockingly in broad daylight.
So if you look at the second location, which was the park connector, people walking there, he probably has the feeling that he can actually get away with crimes, even in broad daylight.
对我们来说，连环这2个字 加随机放在一起，就有时间紧迫性的冲击。一旦发现不同的案子都有相同之处，犯罪手法、地点、时间、同一类型的受害者，都可能指向是同一个嫌疑犯。苏伟坚就是一个很好的例子，他的作案手法有很大的共同点，他的受害者的类型都是相似的，长发、华族女生、年轻、身材娇小，还有就是作案手法，都是用刀，都是从背部袭击，然后尝试从前面攻击。Third crime was committed some 3 to 4 months after the second incident. It happened on the 26th of May 2010, and he now struck at Sembawang, at the void deck of this HDB block of flats. It happened about 8:30 a.m.
8:30 a.m. you would expect people to go to work, kids going to school, people going to the market. So again, the chance of discovery is even higher here. There's again escalation here.
Dr. Jacob, you know, investigations revealed that So Wee Kian actually stayed near the 4th incident.
The more the person is familiar with surroundings, you can actually plan even your getaway as well, right after committing the offenses.
This brings me to an observation. Investigations revealed that when he started off at the first location, he used a Swiss Army knife. And when he ended at the 4th location where the fatality occurred, he used a longer knife, 12 centimeters long in blade. In fact, on the day of the incident itself, sometime before 2 p.m., he stole that knife. And he was looking around, waiting to attack a victim.
The longer the blade is, the chance of inflicting serious injury or even death becomes higher. So it actually shows that his intention to hurt or even to kill has escalated over the last few months.
当时我还记得律师、还有检控官，甚至于法官还有心理医生，大家都赞同说，苏伟坚的精神状态跟平凡人是一定不一样。他在很小的时候就有比较算是性方面的幻想，对于女生，所以从小他就会跟踪女生啊。到他成长之后，他的这个习惯还继续着。
从一名内向不起眼的学生，到双手沾满鲜血的凶徒，是什么样的环境造就了这样一个连环袭击者？被媒体称为“北部砍杀者”的国民服役人员苏伟坚，逍遥法外9个月后，终于被捕了。严重刺伤3名女性和杀害最后1名受害者的他，复杂的家庭背景也随之被曝光。
只要你住在他隔壁，1个星期你就会发觉了，这家人完全不是普通人。我姓陈，名张荣，他们苏家住在我隔壁，也是很久10多年了。他妈妈、爸爸2个都吸毒的，他爸爸进戒毒所，好像住 hotel 这样，进进出出的。就是这家人何止奇怪。奇奇怪怪的人来家里，会跟人家讨钱，他认识的人他就借钱，不认识的他也会跟你借。他本身跟我借，我也是本身借给他，不是一次，一而再再而三，你知道，50、100、50、10块，太多次不行，是吧？后来就知道了，是吧？知道了不要去理他，他们的债啊越踩越深，借大龙钱啊很多啊，拖很久没有还的才来破起。那个大龙他不是破他一间而已的，他破整排的整间呢，哇！10多年前这里是空地，从886A 开始到这边， 全部是空地来的。对面就是学校了，小学的后面那边是一个公园，也是很多主屋区，也是主屋。公园就是提灯笼的案发现场，那谋杀案、提灯笼谋杀案就是发生在那边。那时是报纸还没有出的时候，就很多政府人来。后来最后一次来，就是连朱伟健本身押上来，已经被抓了，已经被抓进去，等回来叫他叙述什么情形，叫他自己坦白承认，讲出一切，没有办法。他从怀孕那一秒钟开始已经被毒害了，他母亲吸毒，他已经完全不健全了。他脑子受损。
In the case of Sovikian, the psychiatrist had diagnosed him to be suffering from schizotypal personality disorder, which is classified as one of the mental disorders. Usually they have odd, eccentric beliefs and thoughts, and they're very socially isolated. They don't have any friends. They're quite anxious. But in this particular case, Sovikian also had sexual fantasies, especially about young women with long hair and wearing short skirts. He in fact had fantasies about wanting to touch them, touch their breasts, and even stab them from the back. From the age of primary 5, Sovikian gave a history of following females, and these fantasies have been there for quite a long time, until the offenses happened.
我还是很不了解他的这个精神状态。一般的人会觉得说，如果你有这样的性侵的念头，那会造成最后性侵的行为，比如说非礼啦，或者是强奸啦。可是虽然苏伟坚的幻想是性侵，可是他始终的行为不是性侵的行为，而是暴力的行为。在他脑海中的这个性侵的念头，跟始终最后他的这个暴力行为之间，他有了这个 blackout， 在他的脑海中，他什么都看不到，就是这样的一个情况。
我是袁凤珠，家庭与心理治疗师，大概有30年了。一个青少年为什么他会成为性罪犯？有些是小时候曾经被性侵犯，有些是因为自己感到自卑、感到痛苦，所以他也加诸于别人。有些是小时候还不到年龄就已经接触到性的知识。他的心里一直要达到满足他的性需要的时候，他就会不择手段。
据统计，新加坡1年平均会发生150起持刀伤人的案件，当中包括凶杀、打劫、群体殴斗，还有严重伤人罪。对法政科的专家来说，刀伤背后可以透露哪些关于凶器的细节？
My name is Dr. Marian Wang. I'm a forensic pathologist. We regularly examine stabbing injuries, and we are able to tell certain characteristics of the knife used in these cases. So here we demonstrate the various knife wounds by using this ballistic gel, which is of the same viscosity or firmness with the human tissue. This is a normal kitchen knife. It's what we call a single-edged knife because you have one blunt edge and one sharp edge. If this knife would be used in a stabbing case, for example like this, the resultant skin wound inflicted by such a knife will have one blunt edge over here, is almost squared, and a sharp edge here. Another possible appearance of a stab wound is an angulated stab wound caused by a knife thrust into a body, twisted within the body and pulled out. The appearance of the stab wound in such cases will be a V-shape or angulated, and this is because the sharp edges will shift during the thrusting in and the lifting off from the skin. There are many factors affecting the appearance of a knife wound on the skin. The victim and the suspect may be moving, and so the direction of the thrust may be different from the withdrawal, and so the wound may be enlarged, may be ragged in appearance, so that will affect the assessment as well. But what we can give you is a general characteristic of the knife. During the autopsy, we also measure the depth of penetration of the skin and also the underlying organs and soft tissue. So by doing that, we can determine the minimum length of the knife.
其实，刀器是一个必需品，每家每户都有。但是，再平常不过的小刀，握在愤怒的少年手里，可以致命。在2020年，一名患有自闭症的14岁少年，就因为被一起小事件和几句不经意的话语激怒，而杀害了自己的父亲。因为年幼，所以少年和他的家人的身份都被保密。
My name is Shashi Nathan. I'm a criminal lawyer. Yes, I remember meeting the boy for the first time at the CID headquarters in Cantonment. He didn't strike me as a cold-blooded killer or someone who had the ability or the strength to take away another person's life. He was scared, nervous, quite withdrawn as a person, and he didn't really open up so quickly.
14岁的男孩不到2周岁就被诊断出患有自闭症，但因为高功能，所以在主流学校念书。然而，少年在2018年却被诊断出患有网络游戏失调症，也被称为游戏成瘾。其实，在2017年，世界卫生组织已经把游戏成瘾归类为一种精神疾病。14岁的男孩被诊断后，曾经到心理卫生学院的国立成瘾治疗服务接受治疗。
People with autism spectrum disorder, or ASD for short, have a higher likelihood of becoming addicted to online gaming. Why is this so? They might be more rigid in their thinking. They could be hyperfixated on certain interests that makes it hard for them to explore other hobbies or other activities. More importantly, they may lack social skills, adaptive functioning skills that makes it hard for them to socialize in the real world. It's so much easier to exist online. You do not have to deal with rejection, disappointment, disapproval. So internet addiction or gaming addiction literally becomes a digital drug.
The young boy is playing a game which is quite violent. This game glorifies things like how you kill a person. When the father found out that he had been playing excessively, he started limiting the time. Not just for him, to be fair, also to the younger brother. And I suppose when this started happening, there was a certain sense of frustration creeping in.
2020年12月11日，一个平常的星期天早上，少年早起，还偷偷违背父亲的警告，玩起了游戏。被发现以后，他被严厉的责骂。过后，父亲也没有多想，就和小儿子习惯性的为全家人洗衣服。要加洗衣粉时，父亲却找不到洗衣粉的勺子。他开始责问长子，一定是他把勺子给弄丢了，并要他用双手把洗衣粉舀起来。
He got very upset. The anger, the frustration, the feeling that he was stuck in the situation was just building and building. He picked out a fruit knife. A fruit knife is a very short blade, but sharp. And he said, if only Papa wasn't around, I could play games all day. It's a simplistic thought. It's not even thinking of killing his father. He just said, if Papa was not around, I can play games all day.
这种成瘾的人，他们就会有一种思想：我要达到我要的，所以我要挪开、除掉拦阻我达到目的的东西或者人。哦，我把你除掉，我就自由了。
Everything happened very quickly. He went forward, he stabbed the father in the neck with the fruit knife. Shortly after the mother came home, she saw the scene, she also panicked.
I'm sorry, Mama. I'm sorry.
The loss of blood was too much. He just died. The young boy told me, which still, I think, remains etched in his memory, is the father, when he passed on, because of the loss of blood, died with his eyes open, and he was staring at his son. Not even out of anger or anything, but surprise, you know.
一个14岁，一个20岁。这2个年轻人因为成瘾和心理疾病导致行为失控，用凶器夺取了他人的性命。在新加坡，谋杀罪是会被判死刑的。少年们要为自己的罪行付出什么样的代价？13到20岁之间的青少年，很多时候脑部发育还没健全，就是所谓的还没开窍。在这不成熟的阶段里，如果成瘾和精神疾病没受到控制，很可能导致年少的他们铸成大错。
为什么一个孩子会杀害自己的父母？我可以这么说，他们内心深处其实都是爱着父母的，可是这么常年的被责备、被拦阻、被他们感觉是攻击，其实潜意识里他们还是爱父母，但是却很恨自己。为什么我这么糟糕，我这么坏？所以就有一种很严重的自我堕落感。
The younger brother, who had been present, had seen the killing. He had gone mute. He had stopped talking. And whether this was shock, whether it was physical or psychological, you know, we couldn't tell at that time. The mother, she was managing from at least 3 or 4 different fronts. Her son was incarcerated. Her son who was at home was not talking. Her husband who had left her. The family of the husband who was asking questions. And I thought to myself, you know, if I was in that situation, if I lost a spouse, a child, you know, I'm not sure that I could have the mental strength to deal with what she was dealing with. But she was very strong, you know, and I think she kept the family together.
游戏成瘾在这几年，尤其是因为疫情的阻断期间，是越来越严重。一方面是很多父母亲自己也是手不离机的，那孩子也觉得这个是很自然的事情。
This was not a dysfunctional family. This was an ordinary, loving family which had a tragedy. Now, his father and his mother were strict in the sense that they wanted to make sure that they dedicated enough time to school, to family, to other activities. Could it have been avoided? Absolutely. Could you foresee this happening? Absolutely not. Something like this could happen in a very ordinary family. Sometimes you just need the fuse to light.
其实，在孩子刚刚成瘾的时候是看得出来的。这个熬夜，成绩本来很好，慢慢下降，不爱交朋友，宅男宅在家里，不参加团体活动，还有最主要很沉默，不愿意跟家人沟通，跟他说几句话他就暴躁。甩东西、踢东西，这就是一个成瘾的现象。
虽然杀害了自己的父亲，少年被判的不是谋杀罪名，而是蓄意严重伤人，必须服刑5年。
We had meetings with the prosecutors. We had produced all the psychiatric reports, the autism reports from when he was younger. One of the things I had argued before the High Court judge was, you can put him away, 7 years, 10 years, 20, even 20 years. But who are we punishing? We're also punishing his family, his brother, his mother, everybody else. By this time, the younger brother had improved and had started talking, which was a good sign. And then I reminded the judge, Your Honor, when he saw his father, as the last ebbs of his life went out of his body, the father was just looking at him. Not out of anger, but really out of shock, surprise. And I think there was love in those eyes, even though his own son had killed him. The real punishment is that he is going to live with this guilt for the rest of his life.
Sorry, Mama! I'm sorry!
He would always say, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I miss my papa.
在2010年，无差别持刀伤人的苏伟坚刺伤了3名女性，还杀害了最后1名受害者。因为接受他精神状况不正常，所以控方同意把谋杀罪改为误杀，还有蓄意严重伤人带武器。苏伟坚罪名成立，被判服刑2个终身监禁。
很多人有这个概念说，如果你有精神病的话，或者精神状态，就是一种免死金牌。很多人要理解的就是除了从这个死者或者是受害者的角度，他们也要从一个被告人的角度来做一定的看法，这样子才取得一个平衡。苏伟坚的案子，法庭就判了2条终身监禁，而不是1条。2条终身监禁同时执行，这个是在新加坡我们刑事法律的制度比较少见的，因为他的精神状态非常不稳定，而且第二就是说，虽然他不需要面临死刑，可是他也不能的轻易这样子放出来融入社会。说最近我也去监狱探望他了，他还是在重复的千交代万交代，记得要跟受害者跟死者的家属道歉。
生命中有些事是无法弥补的，无论怎么道歉或忏悔，青少年杀人事件所造成的伤害，都是受害者家属一辈子的悲痛。
少年就已经是重犯了，有可能再重生救赎吗？这就要看他的造化了。有一些是你给他机会，他反而这个自我堕落。OK， 那有一些你给他机会，会唤醒他那沉睡的灵魂，知道我真不应该这样做的时候，这样的人改造的机会就比较大。
你可以通过 Medicine 应用程序、Spotify 或 Apple Podcast 收听更多真实奇案。